The awakening fury. The emergency klaxon pierced through the sterile air of the UES Retribution's command bridge, its harsh wail echoing off titanium steel bulkheads like the cry of a dying god. Captain Marcus Voss stood motionless at the center of the chaos, his weathered face carved from granite as reports flooded in from across the Outer Rim territories. Each transmission brought worse news than the last. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Tau Cygni colonies," Lieutenant Zara Quinn called out from her tactical station, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. 7 settlements and all gone dark within the last 6 hours. Voss didn't respond immediately. His steel-gray eyes remained fixed on the main holographic display, where red icons blinked like drops of blood against the star map. Each icon represented a human colony. Each icon represented thousands of lives. And one by one they were winking out of existence. "Sir?" Quinn pressed, her dark hair falling across her face as she leaned over her console. "Orders? Show me the transmission logs," Voss said finally, his voice carrying the weight of command earned through 2 decades of service to humanity's expansion into the void. "Everything. Hold nothing back." The main display shifted, replacing the tactical overview with a cascade of fragmented communications. Static-filled voices pleaded for help, screamed warnings, and then silence. But it was the final transmission from New Aberdeen that changed everything. The image was grainy, distorted by electromagnetic interference, but clear enough to see the horror. Keth Empire warships, sleek, predatory vessels that moved like sharks through space, hung in orbit above a burning world. Below them, the colony's sprawling cities were being systematically reduced to glass and ash by orbital bombardment. But the Keth weren't stopping at military targets. Schools, hospitals, civilian shelters, everything was being obliterated with methodical precision. "They're not trying to conquer," whispered Chief Engineer Dmitry Kozlov from his station, his thick Russian accent making the words sound like a funeral dirge. They're erasing us." The transmission crackled and a child's voice cut through the static. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, calling for her mother as the walls of her shelter collapsed around her. Then the feed went dead. The bridge fell into absolute silence. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed muted, as if the Retribution itself was holding its breath. Voss stared at the dark screen for a long moment, his jaw clenched so tight that Quinn could hear his teeth grinding. "Blake," he said quietly, addressing the communications officer. "Get me a channel to Earth Command, Priority Alpha." Communications. Officer Blake Torres looked up from his station, his young face pale. "Sir, with respect, Earth Command is 14 light-years from here. Even with quantum entanglement relays, it'll take hours to establish a stable connection, and then it won't matter," Voss finished. He turned to face his crew, and something in his expression made them all step back instinctively. "Because we're not waiting for orders. Not this time." "Captain?" Quinn's voice was barely above a whisper. Voss moved to his command chair, but didn't sit. Instead, he placed both hands on its armrests and leaned forward, his voice carrying across the bridge with quiet authority. "The Keth Empire has made their intentions clear. This isn't war, it's genocide. They're not conquering human space, they're sterilizing it. Every man, woman, and child in those colonies is dead or dying, and they're going to keep killing until there's nothing left of us but radioactive dust." He straightened, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Gone was the measured tone of a career officer. In its place was something harder, colder, the voice of a man who had looked into the abyss and decided to dive in headfirst. "Kozlov, I want full power to all weapon systems. Divert everything from non-essential systems. Life support, artificial gravity, even the coffee makers. Everything goes to weapons and shields." "Sir," Kozlov said carefully, "at full military power, we'll burn through our energy reserves in less than 2 hours. Without resupply." "We won't need 2 hours," Voss cut him off. "Quinn, tactical analysis. How many Keth ships are in the Tau Cygni system?" Quinn's fingers danced across her console, pulling up sensor data from long-range reconnaissance drones. 12 vessels, sir. Mix of destroyers and heavy cruisers, with 1 dreadnought serving as the flagship. estimated crew complement of 8,000 across the entire fleet. 8,000, Voss repeated, tasting the number. Blake, are you recording this? Yes, sir. Good. I want this logged in the ship's records. Today, at 14:37 hours Galactic Standard Time, the United Earth ship Retribution encountered a Keth Imperial fleet engaged in the systematic extermination of human civilian populations. In accordance with the laws of war and the protection of humanity, this vessel is hereby authorized to use any and all force necessary to eliminate the threat. He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. These were good people. Scientists, explorers, defenders. They had signed up to protect humanity's expansion into the stars, not to become instruments of destruction. But the Keth had made that choice for them. Sir, Quinn said quietly, if we engage a fleet that size alone, we'll be vastly outnumbered. The odds of survival are irrelevant. Voss finished. Kozlov, status on the experimental weapons packages? The engineer's eyes widened. Sir, those are still classified. The plasma lance array hasn't even been properly tested, and the antimatter warheads are strictly regulated under the Geneva Space Accords. The Geneva Space Accords were written when we thought aliens would play by the same rules we do, Voss said. The Keth just taught us otherwise. Authorization code Omega-77. Unlock everything. Kozlov hesitated for a moment, then began entering commands into his console. Deep within the Retribution's armored hull, weapon systems that had never been fired outside of simulations began to power up. The ship trembled slightly as massive capacitors charged and targeting computers came online. Captain, Torres called. Out. I'm picking up a transmission from the Keth fleet. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's in standard Terran. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life and an alien voice filled the air, cold, clinical, utterly without emotion. Human vessel, you will depart this system immediately. The cleansing of inferior species is sanctioned by the Keth Empire under right of purification. Your presence interferes with necessary work. Voss smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Blake, open a channel. All frequencies, maximum broadcast power. Channel open, sir. Voss stepped forward, his voice carrying across space toward the Keth fleet and beyond, toward any listening ears in the void. This is Captain Marcus Voss of the United Earth ship Retribution. You want to talk about purification? Let me show you what that really means. He turned to Quinn. All weapons, target the dreadnought. Full salvo. Sir, at this range. Do it. The Retribution's experimental plasma lance array fired for the first time in actual combat, sending a coherent beam of superheated matter across the void at near light speed. It struck the Keth dreadnought's shields and burned through them like tissue paper, carving a molten furrow along the alien ship's hull. Secondary explosions bloomed along the vessel's length as atmosphere vented into space. Direct hit, Quinn reported, her voice filled with savage satisfaction. Their shields are down and we've breached their main reactor housing. But Voss wasn't finished. Antimatter warheads target their escort vessels, fire at will. The Retribution unleashed hell. Antimatter warheads, each one capable of cracking a moon, streaked toward the Keth fleet like falling stars. The aliens tried to return fire, but they had been caught completely off guard. They had expected fear, surrender, or at most token resistance. They had not expected humanity to abandon every restraint and fight like cornered animals. Within minutes, half the Keth fleet was dead or dying. The survivors tried to retreat, but Voss wasn't letting anyone escape to report what they had seen. Blake, he said calmly, record this message for transmission to every Keth frequency we can reach. The communications officer nodded, his hands shaking as he prepared the broadcast array. Voss looked directly into the recording sensor and his voice carried the finality of a judge passing sentence. To the Keth Empire and any other species listening, you made a mistake today. You thought humanity would be easy prey. You thought we would beg for mercy, negotiate for our lives, or die quietly in the dark. You were wrong. Behind him, the last Keth ship exploded in a brief star of fusion fire. From this moment forward, any alien force that threatens human life will face total annihilation. No prisoners, No mercy, no survivors. You wanted to see what monsters look like? Congratulations, you just created them. The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent once more. In the distance, the debris of the Keth fleet tumbled slowly through space, already cooling toward absolute zero. Marcus Voss had just declared war on the galaxy, and this was only the beginning. The galaxy burns 3 weeks after the Tau Cini massacre. The Retribution was no longer alone. Captain Marcus Voss stood on his command bridge, watching through the viewport as 37 human warships moved in perfect formation through the void, destroyers, cruisers, and 3 massive dreadnoughts that had been pulled from Earth's strategic reserves. Each vessel bore fresh scars from recent battles, their hulls scorched black from plasma fire and pockmarked with kinetic impacts. They called themselves the Extinction Fleet. Admiral Corvanus is requesting a secure channel, Lieutenant Zara Quinn announced from her station. Her voice had changed over the past weeks, harder, colder, like steel left too long in winter. They had all changed. Put her through, Voss replied, never taking his eyes off the tactical display showing the Keth Empire's inner systems. 17 colonies wiped clean. 43 billion lives reduced to ash and memory. The numbers had lost all meaning except as fuel for the rage that now burned in every human heart. The holographic projector flickered, and Admiral Petra Corvanus materialized on the bridge, a stern woman in her 60s, whose gray uniform bore more decorations than empty space. Her face was gaunt, aged a decade in 3 weeks, but her eyes burned with the same cold fire that drove them all. Captain Voss, she said without preamble, Earth Command has received another diplomatic overture from the Keth Empire. War Prince Thekmor is requesting a ceasefire and formal negotiations. Voss turned slowly, his expression unchanging. And Earth Command's response? They want to hear the terms, Corvanus said carefully. The losses we've inflicted have been substantial. The galactic community is pressuring both sides to find a peaceful resolution. A bitter laugh escaped Voss's lips. Peaceful. Tell me, Admiral, did they find peace when they glassed New Aberdeen? When they turned the children of Tau Cygni into radioactive shadows? Marcus, Corvanus said quietly, using his first name in a way that cut through military protocol. I've read your reports. I know what you've seen. But if we continue down this path, we finish what they started, Voss interrupted. No negotiations, no ceasefires, no mercy. They chose extinction as their weapon. Now they'll experience it firsthand. The transmission ended abruptly. Voss turned back to his crew, noting how none of them flinched at his words. They had all seen the recordings from the colonies. They had all lost friends, family, entire worlds to the Keth systematic slaughter. Chief Kozlov, Voss called out. Status on the new weapon systems? The Russian engineer looked up from his console, his face illuminated by the glow of forbidden schematics. Dr. Watanabe's modifications to the antimatter warheads are complete. Each one now carries enough destructive force to crack a planet's crust. The stellar collapse torpedoes are still theoretical, but initial simulations suggest they could destabilize a star's fusion reaction. Stellar collapse torpedoes, Quinn repeated quietly. Jesus, Captain, we're talking about weaponizing stars. Voss nodded grimly. The Keth worship their sun god Kethmaran. They believe their home star is divine, eternal, untouchable. Let's see how divine it looks when it goes supernova. Across the bridge, Communications Officer Blake Torres raised his hand. Sir, incoming transmission from the Keth fleet. War Prince Thekmor himself. On screen. The holographic display shifted, revealing an alien figure that embodied predatory elegance. Thekmor stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming like black metal under the harsh lights of his command ship. 4 arms moved in precise ritualistic gestures as he spoke, and his voice carried the harmonic resonance that all Keth used to demonstrate superiority. Captain Voss of the Human War Pack, Thekmor began, his words dripping with condescension. Your species fights with admirable ferocity, but you lack wisdom. The strong consume the weak. This is natural law. Accept your place in the cosmic order. and we will grant your remaining populations the honor of serving the Empire. Voss stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. Let me make our position clear, War Prince. You started this war by murdering innocent civilians. You called it purification. We're going to show you what true purification looks like. You threaten the Keth Empire? Thekmor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. We who have consumed 1,000 species? We who have turned entire sectors into feeding grounds? Your courage is noted, small human, but ultimately meaningless. Blake, Voss said without breaking eye contact with the alien. Send War Prince Thekmor the tactical data from our last engagement. Torres's fingers flew across his console. Transmitted, sir. On the display, Thekmor's expression changed as he reviewed the data. His four eyes widened, and his harmonic voice lost its mocking tone. The tactical report showed the complete annihilation of the Keth 7th Fleet. 43 vessels reduced to atomic particles in under 2 hours. Impossible, Thekmor whispered. The Geneva Accords forbid such weapons. No civilized species would. We're not civilized anymore. Voss cut him off. You made sure of that when you turned our children into ash. You want to see what monsters we can become? Keep watching. He turned to Quinn. All ships assume attack formation. Target the Keth home system. We're ending this. The extinction fleet moved like a plague through space, leaving dead worlds in its wake. The Keth Empire's outer defenses, ancient, orbital fortresses that had stood for millennia, were reduced to debris fields within hours. Defense fleets that had conquered entire sectors were swept aside like insects before a hurricane. Dr. Jin Watanabe, the weapons developer who had turned humanity's finest minds toward total destruction, watched from the Retribution's observation deck as his creations remade the cosmos. The stellar collapse torpedo streaked toward Kethmaran, the Empire's sacred sun, carrying with it the death of not just a star, but an entire solar system. Detonation in 30 seconds, Watanabe announced, his voice hollow. The gravitational compression field will destabilize the star's core fusion reaction. The subsequent supernova will sterilize everything within 12 light-years. Voss nodded. Around him, his bridge crew watched in silence as the torpedo reached its target. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the star began to pulse. Slowly at first, then with increasing violence. Its light shifted from warm yellow to angry red, then to blinding white as its core began to collapse. The Keth homeworld, Quinn reported. Population estimates suggest. I don't want to know, Voss said quietly. Numbers don't matter anymore. Justice does. The star exploded. Even from this distance, the shockwave was visible. An expanding sphere of pure energy that consumed planets, moons, and entire fleets in seconds. The Keth homeworld, the birthplace of their empire, simply ceased to exist. Billions of lives, soldiers and civilians, young and old, were atomized in an instant of cosmic fire. War Prince Thekmor's final transmission reached the Retribution just before the communication array on his flagship was vaporized. You have destroyed everything. Our worlds, our colonies, our children, Voss finished. Our future, our hope. You took all of that from us first. The transmission ended. In the tactical display, every red icon representing a Keth vessel winked out of existence. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years was gone, reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Sergeant Nova Reeves, who had led the Marine boarding parties that captured the intelligence needed to locate the Keth home system, stood beside Voss as they watched the star die. It's over, she said simply. No, Voss replied. It's just beginning. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light through quantum communication networks. The human species, once considered primitive upstarts clinging to the edges of civilized space, had committed an act of genocide so absolute that it defied comprehension. They had not just defeated the Keth Empire, they had erased it from existence. Within hours, ambassadors from a dozen species requested immediate audiences with Earth Command. Trade agreements that had been pending for years were suddenly approved without question. Territorial disputes that had simmered for decades were quietly abandoned in humanity's favor. The message was clear: do not cross the humans. They were no longer the peaceful explorers who had ventured into space with dreams of cooperation and mutual understanding. They were something darker now, something that would burn down the entire galaxy before they allowed another of their worlds to fall. Admiral Corvanus's final transmission to the extinction fleet came as they began their journey back to human space. Earth command to all vessels. You are hereby ordered to return to your home bases for debriefing and reassignment. Effective immediately, the Sol Defense Fleet is being expanded to include all ships under Captain Voss's command. Voss listened to the message in silence, then turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. We're going home. But remember, this isn't an ending. It's a warning. We've shown the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. Now we make sure they never forget. As the Retribution and her sister ships turned toward Earth, they left behind a stellar graveyard that would burn for 1,000,000 years, a monument to the price of pushing humanity too far. The gentle species that had once hoped to find brothers among the stars was gone forever. In its place stood something terrible and magnificent, a civilization that would never again allow itself to be the victim. They had learned the hardest lesson the universe had to teach. Sometimes the only way to preserve what you love is to become what you hate. And humanity had become very good at hating.